The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily represent those of any organization, including One Generation Away.
The freedom of a people to choose its leaders is the root of liberty.
Keep alive this experiment in liberty.
Liberty, in case you've forgotten, is the soul's right to breathe.
Government should be very minimal in protecting liberty.
Peace cannot be purchased at the cost of liberty.
The sturdy ground of liberty.
Liberty once lost is lost forever.
Fight for their liberty and for our security.
Guarantees individual liberty.
This great republic, born alone in liberty.
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 Liberty. Liberty.
Just how much do you want liberty?
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner,
a production of LibertyNation.com.
cutting through the double talk, taking on the topics, going after what the politicians really mean, and making it all clear. For your freedom and your liberty. Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Elizabeth Warren throws her hat into the teepee. Mitt Romney goes full-on never Trump in his political comeback. And the first Palestinian American ever elected to Congress drops the F-bomb on President Trump. Happy New Year, and welcome into the first 2019 edition of Liberty Nation Radio, a production of LibertyNation.com and heard from coast to coast on the Radio America network. Oh, the fireworks ahead. We will review the bidding as Democrats unleash their pent-up fury on the President of the United States. Mitt Romney, given up for dead after getting shellacked in the 2012 presidential election, is reborn as a U.S. Senator, and before even being sworn in, takes aim at the man who did win the presidency. And the partial government shutdown is set to enter a third week. We'll be joined by LibertyNation.com national correspondent Joe Schaeffer to review the bidding, and by LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor Scott Cosenza to preview the year ahead for your individual liberty. Well, just when you thought the never-Trump faction of the Republican Party had been dismissed in disgrace with the retirement of Senators Jeff Flake and Bob Corker, along comes the loser of the 2012 presidential election to willingly serve as the useful establishment idiot the left desires as its new house pet, or perhaps more precisely, its new lawn jockey. Yes, before even being sworn into his new position as U.S. Senator from Utah, Mitt Romney buddied up to the leader of the resistance, the Washington Post, and delivered a broadside at the man who was able to accomplish what he could not, win the presidency. Evidently, fancying himself as a paragon of virtue, the title of Romney's op-ed ends with, "Trump's character falls short." We're left to wonder who died and left Mitt in charge of the character police. As the nation turned its lonely eyes to the failed presidential nominee and fake conservative and breathlessly awaited his verdict, Romney delivered, quote, "Trump's conduct over the past 2 years, particularly his actions last month, is evidence that the president has not risen to the mantle of the office," unquote. Then Romney proceeded to lecture us with soaring rhetoric and a bottomless cup of highfalutin cliches on what a president is supposed to be. Quote, "To a great degree, a presidency shapes the public character of the nation. A president should unite us and inspire us to follow our better angels. A president should demonstrate the essential qualities of honesty and integrity and elevate the national discourse with comity and mutual respect." But Mitt wasn't done. Quote, "Trump's words and actions have caused dismay around the world," unquote. Yes, indeed, those globalists running Europe into the ground with their socialist, light, low-growth, high unemployment economies do not approve of the 45th president. Shame about that. As Romney concluded his rant, essentially a rinse and repeat of his unfortunate 2012 campaign, he offered up the final flowers for the bouquet he's thrown to the swamp establishment to assure that, unlike This president, he's on the A list for all the right social events. Quote, I will speak out against significant statements or actions that are divisive, racist, sexist, anti-immigrant. Well, like moths to the flame, and as sure as the sun rising in the east, the leftist media that savaged Romney in 2012 is now anointing him as a Christ-like figure. They can barely contain their glee, and we will play you some of their comments a bit later in the show. So I guess that's it. If Trump can't pass the Romney character test, he ought to just resign right now. No point in even waiting for the Mueller report, which, of course, is sure to be fair and balanced. Seriously, though, exactly why did Romney run for the Senate 6 years after everyone assumed, per General Douglas MacArthur, that he would just fade away like old soldiers who never die? And why, in God's name, did he decide to gratuitously demonize his own president? Well, consistent with his Hillary-like refusal to get the message from voters and leave the stage with some semblance of dignity, old Mint decided he would snatch the low-hanging fruit of a Senate seat in the most Republican state in the nation to use as a platform to unleash his transparently vengeful reprisals against a president who said Romney choked in 2012. Mr. Mitt, apparently feeling that his scurrilous attacks on the nominee of his own party in 2016 did not complete his hit job. Maybe he did this because Trump made a fool of him by dangling the job of Secretary of State, forcing Romney to kiss the ring and say nice things before dismissing him with a wave of his hand, much to the relief of Trump supporters who view Romney as the embodiment of everything that was wrong with the GOP. So just like John McCain, the GOP nominee who preceded him and got shellacked in 2008, Romney appears driven by revenge and undiluted envy, or by resentment that the country thoroughly rejected his own classic establishment countenance and platform. Conservatives, always wary of Romney, held their noses and voted for him, but it was hardly enough because most of the country was unmoved by Romney's wooden soldier act. Or Romney may be desperately seeking a too little too late Sally Fields-like affirmation from his party. You like me, you like me. Good luck with that. Trump's approval among GOP voters sits at near 90%, equal or greater than Ronald Reagan. And Americans, Mitt will soon learn, don't care much for sore losers. This washed-up relic of the bad old days of GOP loserdom will soon learn that no one, other than the Trump-deranged media, actually cares what he thinks anymore. Welcome to 6 years of Mitt Romney, the left's new lawn jockey. We will break away for a moment and then be back to preview the political year ahead with LibertyNation.com national correspondent Joe Schaeffer.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
We believe that all men are entitled to blessings of liberty.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Well, a new year is upon us, which brings us a new House of Representatives controlled by the Democrats, a somewhat new partial government shutdown now 2 weeks old, a not-so-new special counsel investigation now 20 months old, and a now time-tested President Donald J. Trump still holding fast in the Oval Office. Elizabeth Warren, Mitt Romney, and Rashida Tlaib grab the headlines as the new year dawns. Fasten your seatbelts, folks. The wild ride that has been the almost 2 years of the Trump presidency is about to get even wilder, if that's even possible. And joining us to review the bidding and preview the year ahead in politics is Joe Schaeffer, national correspondent for LibertyNation.com. Welcome, Joe, and let's get to the heart of the matter right away with the government shutdown. The president is holding out for $5 billion for his wall. The Democrats are offering zero. Which side is more likely to give ground and back down, and when?
Well, Happy New Year, Tim, first of all. Thanks
you
for
as
having
well.
me. I hate to say it, but I think the White House is going to back down first based on how this whole thing's been going for 2 years. Click back to 2017, and we had a Senate Majority Leader who was a Republican and a Speaker of the House who was a Republican telling us we're getting $12 to $15 billion in wall funding, and that wasn't done. And the can just kept getting kicked down the road. Now we have a Democrat House, and we're asking for $5 billion. This wall is supposed to cost $25 billion. So this is just a small down payment, and we're fighting about this. The Trump administration has come down so much on this already. I think any kind of face-saving thing, even if it's far less than $5 billion, I'm afraid that they're going to take it, which is a shame because I think the shutdown is going to hurt Congress much more than it would the White House.
Now, conventional wisdom is that the GOP always gets hurt more than the Democrats by government shutdowns. But that was, of course, turned upside down when after the last partial shutdown, which only lasted a couple of days, Chuck Schumer and the Democrats folded. So which party, if either of them, is going to be most damaged in this shutdown?
Well, I think it's both parties if you look at it in that they're kind of a tag team effort against Trump. We've talked about this before. Trump is outside the traditional party labels. There's a GOP establishment in Congress that is stridently opposed to the changes he wants to make for this country. They're going to lose in this shutdown. They're going to be more discredited than they already are. We already have Ryan leaving. There was an article in Breitbart the other day, a poll saying he had 12% favorability rating as he was exiting, which to me says it all.
It's gone up then. It's gone up then.
Yeah, I think some of his family members were polled. That just speaks everything to the popularity of the Republican establishment brand. So they're going to lose even more on this, but hey, what do they have to lose? The Democrats are going to lose. They're into Congress now. They're going to look less like adults. They can't run the House. They can't do things. Are they just going to oppose this president for 2 years and not accomplish anything for the American people? So I hope Trump stands strong. Every passing day that this shutdown continues is going to be good for him politically. And it's going to make this Congress that has been opposing the changes the American people elected him to bring about. It's going to bring that up more and more each day and discredit these hack politicians who are holding back the will of the American people.
Okay, well stated. Let's switch gears a little. Weeks after being elected as the first Palestinian ever in Congress, Rashida Tlaib actually says about Trump, "We're going to impeach the mother effer." Now, this is exactly why I said Trump might well benefit by having Democrats running the House for the next couple of years so he can have a perfect foil, a House run by the resistance, which has now shown its hand early. Will Nancy Pelosi be able to control these upstart progressives? Does she even want to? And will the House be able to accomplish anything outside of launching multiple investigations of the president?
Yeah, it's going to be a real reality show for the next for 2019, isn't it? I don't think she's going to be able to control them. I think there's a higher issue going on here, which is really going to come out into 2019, that the Democrats are divided generationally. There's this older guard of Democrats, Nancy Pelosi kind of personifies them, that does not want to give way to upstart progressives, another way of saying a younger generation of Democrats who are more stridently progressive. But there's some old-fashioned power politics going on with these older Democrats. They don't want to cede the reins. The younger people are not happy about it. Nancy Pelosi's not leading anything right now when it comes with her own party. And that's going to be what goes on in 2019, I think, is we're going to see this generational conflict between Democrats. And I actually think it's going to cause even more chaos because they're going to still be going after Trump 24 hours a day. So, you know, good or bad, do we want a Democratic House to accomplish anything? I guess no. But here we go. We're going to have another year of Congress not doing anything. And you know, the clock is ticking on the Trump administration, unfortunately. Hopefully he'll be elected. But, you know, we need our wall. We got to get our wall. We were promised a wall. And the White House has to figure out a way around this. There's going to be chaos in Congress, and they have to find out how to get the things done that they need to get done.
Elizabeth Warren is first out of the gate in what's likely to be an incredibly crowded Democratic field of presidential hopefuls that want to take on Trump in 2020. Senator Warren cut the G's off the end of her words, talked about her daddy, apparently trying to sound like an authentic everyday American and not the left-wing Harvard professor and Massachusetts senator that she is. Does she have a prayer?
She's got no chance at all, and I think she knows it even. But it's funny. I watched that video of her drinking the bottle of beer and trying to sound like a regular gal, and I actually didn't think it was that bad. You know, it wasn't Dukakis riding around in the tank. But, you know, it wasn't that bad.
Oh, the memories.
But if you're old enough to remember that, like some of us are, but still people jumped all over her. And I think that again shows that these younger progressives have had it with these older Democrats. I think she doesn't want to be put into that label with the Dianne Feinsteins, the Nancy Pelosi's, even the Joe Biden. She wants it to not be that old guard, but she is that old guard, and she's not getting out of that. And the young progressives aren't letting her get away with it. She's not going to have any appeal to them. And even worse here, we're going to see this Democratic presidential primary, which is going to start in 2019. It starts earlier every election. It's just going to devolve into this cheesy, bad reality show, which hopefully will show the American voters that this is not a party that you can trust with governing this country. They're immature. They don't really have ideas. So it's all posturing. It's all presenting themselves. It's all cheesy labels and coming up with bumper sticker ideas. They don't have anything to offer the American people. And so, you know, let it happen. Let them battle each other out, look as bad as they can publicly. Trump should really, really be the winner in all of this.
Now, with all due respect, Joe, I do think that Elizabeth Warren already had her Dukakis in the tank moment when she released the results of that DNA test, which showed that she's actually only half as Indian as the average American. But be that as it may, it's truly remarkable that here we are less than 2 years from the 2020 presidential election, and the leader by far among Democrats is a guy, Joe Biden, who had run twice before and never exceeded 1% and won absolutely nothing. So that's the state of the Democratic Party. Thanks for joining us, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Joe Schaeffer, national correspondent for LibertyNation.com. Stay close, because after a quick break, we'll be back with Say What?
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Far more important than my political future and far more important than yours, the well-being of our country.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Liberty Nation Radio, a production of LibertyNation.com and heard from coast to coast on the Radio America Network. And a shout out this week to the good folks listening on KBKW 100.5 FM and 1320 AM in Aberdeen, Grays Harbor County, Washington, gateway to the Olympic Peninsula. Thanks for jumping on board today.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
And now it's time for our signature segment, Say What, as we roll out some of the most wacky, astonishing, and damnable things uttered by politicians and the chattering class. If you wondered how the young upstart progressives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who are now part of the majority controlling the House, would behave with their newfound power, wonder no more. There were splashy headlines all over the elite media on election night about the victory of the first Palestinian American ever elected to Congress, Rashida Tlaib, from Michigan's 13th Congressional District. And the first thing she did upon taking office, you wouldn't believe it unless you actually heard it, was drop the F-bomb on President Trump.
People love you, and you win. Woo! And when your son looks at you and says, Mama, look, you won, bullies don't win. And I said, baby, they don't, because we're going to go in there, we're going to impeach the mother...
We're going to impeach the mother effer. I'm sure Palestinians across the globe sure are proud of the first of their heritage to reach the U.S. Congress. Unbelievable. Meanwhile, the partial government shutdown carries on. It's now 2 weeks old. And Senator Rand Paul went on Fox News and pointed out that unlike Democrat presidents, Trump isn't shuttering things just to try and whip up public outrage, and thus the shutdown has flown largely under the radar.
Well, you know, there is a big danger that the government shut down and no one notices. And in the past, the shutdowns have always been, or a lot of them have been with a Democrat president, and they do everything possible, like closing down overpasses, closing down empty parking lots, closing down the World War II memorial, which has no attendant or no cost to keep open. This time they're not doing that, and so it's not quite as noticeable. Plus, 75% of the government's already funded, including the military. So there is a chance nobody notices.
And then Rand Paul went on to discuss the decision by freshman senator and failed 2012 presidential nominee Mitt Romney to trash the president of his own party in a Washington Post op-ed before he'd even been sworn in.
I think it's going to backfire on him. I think there's going to be a backlash from conservatives across the country who say, well, gosh, the president gave us 2 conservative Supreme Court leaders. The president gave us the largest tax cut in 20 or 30 years.
Well, he commended those efforts. He did commend those efforts. You like that?
Yeah, but then why is he out there calling the president dishonest? I think that's when you attack someone's character like that, I think that's such a low blow and so personally directed and so malevolent that it's not something like, oh, we're going to, someone's going to change their character. He's now called his character dishonest. And I think that's a bad way for him to start in the Senate.
Romney will soon learn that, as we've discussed. But how about the particulars of Romney, the many faces of Mitt? Let's start with his savage attack on then-candidate Donald Trump in 2016.
Donald Trump is a phony, a fraud. His promises are as worthless as a degree from Trump University. He's playing the members of the American public for suckers. His domestic policies would lead to recession. His foreign policies would make America and the world less safe. He has neither the temperament nor the judgment to be president.
But Trump became president and dangled the possibility of Romney becoming Secretary of State. And two-faced Mitt turned 180 degrees with fawning praise of then-President-elect Trump.
I've had a wonderful evening with President-elect Trump. We had another discussion about affairs throughout the world, and these discussions I've had with him have been enlightening and interesting and engaging. I've enjoyed them very, very much. I was also very impressed by the remarks he made on his victory night. And he continues with a message of inclusion and bringing people together.
Yep, Romney was willing to prostrate himself, totally contradict his stinging indictment of Trump, and act like the stereotypical career politician that he is. But he never got to be Secretary of State. Which brings us to 2019 and Romney's self-important op-ed in the Washington Post. And Newt Gingrich, who knows a thing or two about how Congress works, said Romney obviously doesn't.
Mitt Romney's a freshman senator, so I'm not sure he's only a top Republican because he was once the nominee and lost. The Senate doesn't care who you used to be. The senators aren't going to go, oh, yeah, we owe you a lot of extra room because you were once the Republican nominee.
Now, forgetting even his attacks on the president of his own party, how about the headline of Romney's op-ed? The president shapes the public character of the nation. Now, there, my friends, is the mindset of a career establishment, big government politician. Note to Mitt, no politician shapes the public character of the nation. The people do. You know, the little people you're so anxious to lecture about your own awesome virtue. But the leftist media was all a Twitter that Romney stepped up to attack Trump. So predictable. They laid waste to him in 2012 when he was running against Barack Obama, but are now anointing him as a Christ-like figure. Listen to Mika Brzezinski and Walter Isaacson, swamp lifers, heaping praise on Romney on MSNBC.
Do you think he creates a space for voiceless, spineless Republicans?
Absolutely. Mitt Romney is everything that Donald Trump isn't. He's deeply moral, a very kind person, somebody with a sense of civic duty and civility.
Mitt Romney, the conscience of the true Republican Party, i.e. the establishment party until Trump came along and rendered them no longer relevant. Then we have FAUX-Cohantas, Elizabeth Warren, who chose New Year's Eve of all times to announce, essentially, that she'll be running for president, as everyone expected. But even the leftist elite media is trashing her. Here's political commentator Harry Enton on CNN.
Usually, if you look at people's home state polling, you would, in fact, see that they are well out ahead. You know, if you look at Joe Biden's polling in Delaware or Bernie Sanders' polling in Vermont, they both poll particularly well in their home states. But in Massachusetts, Liz Warren, when matched up against her opponents in a potential Democratic primary, she's actually polling third or fourth behind Biden and Sanders, which suggests something's quite wrong, right? Because if the people in your own home state, the Democrats in your own home state, are saying, you know what, maybe we prefer another Democrat, perhaps it says when other people nationwide are exposed to Liz Warren, they may not like her as much.
Of course, FAUX-Cohantas' release of her DNA test proving she's an Indian didn't exactly help. In fact, it may have been one of the most ham-handed, tone-deaf moves in recent political history, right up there with Hillary Clinton's basket of deplorables. We will take a quick break and then come back to discuss the threats and promising developments in store in the year ahead affecting your individual liberty.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
And now it is time to welcome in, for the first time in the year of our Lord 2019, our regular contributor and constitutional lawyer and LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor, Scott Cosenza. Happy New Year, Scott.
Happy New Year to you, Tim.
All right, so last week we took a look back at the most significant, overlooked, underreported stories affecting individual liberty from 2018. This week we look ahead to 2019, and you've selected 3 areas where you think threats or perhaps promising developments for liberty are most likely to occur. So let's start with number 1.
Okay, in no particular order, I would say. Number 1 is gun control. There are so many current active cases in the federal courts, Tim, with I think it's not fair to say a likelihood of getting to the Supreme Court, but a very strong chance of getting to the Supreme Court. And among these are the New Jersey Magazine ban case and the bump stock ban case. There are others as well, which present the question that the Supreme Court hasn't answered, I think, explicitly enough. There are some legal commentators who believe they have, but that the Heller case needs a bright line rule, which is to say the Supreme Court needs to say to the lower courts, when you're examining a Second Amendment or gun control proposal, this is the lens or filter through which it has to pass in order to meet constitutional muster. They haven't said that explicitly enough, at least for some in the federal judiciary. And so we have this hodgepodge where some regulations are passed through at a lower level of scrutiny and some are passed through at a higher level of scrutiny. It's an untenable solution, I think, going forward. And I expect to see, or hope to see, I would suggest, some normalization or clarification, I would say, from the court. Yeah.
Now, in the past, when someone like Barack Obama gets elected or the Democrats take control of one or both houses of Congress, chambers of Congress, that has resulted in a greater energy in the gun rights movement than when you have perhaps someone like Trump or Bush in the White House. Now you've got the Democrats taking control of the House this week. So will their inevitable grandstanding regarding gun control and inevitable legislation, likely that will go nowhere because the Senate will never confirm it, will that affect the gun rights and gun control? Which will it affect positively, do you think? The gun rights movement or the gun control movement?
I don't know that the Senate, or the House control by Democrats itself will have much bearing. The only thing I can think of, Tim, is that it could drive, if they get traction, and they do have the entirety of the legacy media to help generate that traction. So I don't think it's far reach to say that they could get some traction. We could see some gun control proposals coming out of the House that some could get passed by the Senate. You know, the Donald Trump, he has revealed with his bump stock ban to not be what many gun control opponents or gun rights advocates thought he was, which was a stalwart supporter of gun rights. Now, certainly, I don't think any of them would say that they would rather his major party opponent Hillary Clinton be president of the United States, because almost certainly she would be far worse on guns. But Trump is no picnic in terms of his fidelity to the gun rights movement.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being perfection in terms of a pro-gun rights president, and 0 being someone like Hillary Clinton, where would you put Trump?
5. Middle of the road.
5 only.
Yeah, middle of the road. He has not used the power of his office to do things that could lift the burden on gun owners that they're currently placed with in terms of some of the background check waiting times and things like that he actually does have sole control over, appropriately sole control. What I mean by that is, we denigrate Barack Obama for saying he'll use his pen and his phone for doing things that we think that, are not the place of the executive. But who runs the ATF is the executive department, and the ATF could be either hostile to gun owners or responsive to gun owners, sort of more customer service focused. And we don't see that from Donald Trump. And in fact, the only thing we have in terms of new gun laws or regulations is an increased restriction, and in fact one I believe that was handed down unconstitutionally and blatantly so in this bump stock ban that is going into effect presently.
All right. Issue 2 coming up in 2019, in your view?
Let's talk about drugs. Let's talk about marijuana. I tried to clip the sound, to find the sound to clip it for audio for you, and I couldn't find it anywhere out there. But I saw a commercial. I left CNN on for the dog the other day, and I tried to clip. There was a John Boehner commercial for some marijuana summit.
Yes, I know. That's too funny. It's too funny.
That he has gone all in on marijuana. Now he is, they're buttering his bread, so to speak. He's on the board of.
You mean he's getting paid for that? John Boehner as the face of marijuana legalization is just too funny to even process.
It's so
honestly,
right?
It really is.
So I just think we're going to see a lot of movement on that this year because there has to be movement on it. We now have Canada legalization, a 3,000-mile-long undefended border where marijuana is legal, to say nothing of all the states in the United States.
It's now 10 where recreational use and sale are now permitted.
Non-prescription is the preferred term for those.
And when you include the states where it's legal to consume marijuana recreationally but not sell it, and the states that have prescription drug weed, that totals about 35, 36 at this point, I think.
Over a majority of states now. So there still needs to be a reckoning between the federal, and I always try to say this because I think so many people don't realize it. Any use, possession, growing, selling, anything regarding marijuana at the federal level is a federal felony. Okay? That this happens every day in thousands and thousands, probably millions of transactions in America at every store that you've mentioned in those states. That cannot go on, and it needs to be rectified, and I think it will, just because what cannot go on will not go on. So.
Maybe the Democrats running the House will make a move on this, if only rhetorically.
It seemed like I didn't mean to cut you off there. It seemed like a no-brainer, though, right, for them to say,
yeah.
But then again, Tim, the Democrats were the driving force in the drug war for so long. They controlled many states where they're the mayors of the big cities, where the drug war is the most punishing, where they have governors of those states that are Democrats that are controlled by Democrat legislatures. So the idea that they're somehow more enlightened on this issue, I think, is probably a false one.
Well, and Bill Clinton willingly picked up the drug war that had been started by his predecessor, George H.W. Bush. There was no...
Actually, if we want to look forward, Tim, Joe Biden is one of the principal authors of the crime bill that really did so much damage to the drug war. So... The newest guy, who may very well be the next Democrat candidate for president of the United States, is one of the biggest drug warriors we have.
Mm-hmm. How ironic is that? Let's move to your number 3 choice for the most significant issue. And again, these are not in order preface necessarily, but
this probably should be number 1.
The third issue regarding individual liberty likely to be in play in 2019.
Well, this is free speech, and most often we talk about free speech issues when they concern direct involvement with government actors and non-government actors. And it's a little bit different because it involves these social media platforms, these online platforms, and how they are now playing the political game of defunding and disallowing people who say things they don't like. And usually the things that they almost exclusively who they deplatform is people on the right side of the political spectrum who are demanding free speech rather than censorious and left-wing speech. The most recent is Patreon. Patreon is basically, it used to be anyway, just a way for people to conveniently fund others. So we could have a Patreon account for this podcast, for instance, and people who wanted to support it could go and support the Patreon. Many podcasts were supported this way. Well, they are now policing the language of the people who use Patreon for things they do off the network. So it would be like if a YouTube person had tweeted a couple of years ago a tweet and somebody said, well, you can't be on YouTube now. And they said, well, why not? All my videos are clean and articulate and there's nothing there that's a problem. And they said, oh, yes, well, 3 years ago you sent this tweet out and it contains a word which we think is not an appropriate word to use in any circumstance. And you say, well, how can I? That doesn't make any sense. Well, it does make sense when people are using other people's words just simply for the sole purpose of shutting them up.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Tim.
This program, Liberty Nation Radio and LibertyNation.com's own podcast, The Uprising, with me and Scott and Lisa K. Donner, are available to you on demand at LibertyNation.com and from fine podcast providers everywhere. So that is it for this first week of 2019. We'll be back at you next week, same time, same station. Till then, this is Tim Donner saying, stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.